a Noble Media Group member.
America's known our share of tyrants. In response to tyranny, we created one of the greatest guiding documents ever written by mankind. We stood for what was right. We've also made mistakes, but we corrected those mistakes by fighting for what was right both inside our borders and beyond. Today, America faces another challenge: Christian nationalism. Misguided faith and misguided patriotism justifying misguided deeds.
Turn the hearts of those who are in power and position to make decisions.
That's circle, breach the line.
That's not who we are, America. The Constitution is as true today as the day it was ratified. America stands for freedom, and America stands for doing what's right. And it's time we start restoring the American dream. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Restoring the American Dream. You're here with Brian Mistro and, of course, the Reverend Michael Faulkner. I'm glad you've joined us this evening. It's good. We're going to have some fun with this one, Michael. We're going to have a lot of fun with this subject tonight. So I'm gonna start it off, and I want to read a quote from George Washington, Michael, if that's okay. And let's deep dive it. So this is going to be part of a multi-part series, folks, where we're discussing how partisan politics is destroying the American dream, and what we can do, how we can identify things that we can do better. But it's going to be part of a really enjoyable and educational process, of which nobody else is really talking about. So let me go ahead, if I can, and let's start with the first slide, and I want to use a quote with George Washington. Quote, "The alternate domination of one faction over another is itself a frightful despotism." Of course, that's George Washington. You did choose that phrase from George Washington, Michael. Why did you talk about that?
You know, George Washington, he mentioned that in his 230 years ago during his farewell address. And he was a wise old sage. He had lived his life. He had spent 40 years or 50 years of his life, birthing a nation and literally bleeding and giving his life to bring this ideal into focus. And he saw that human nature could destroy it through despotism and through party fractions. He understood the political process. He saw it right within his own administration between, Hamilton and Jefferson. Just the fractions. But here's the thing that happens. It's not that we disagree, but when we disagree and make it personal and make it such that we not only are on different sides of an issue, but we are enemies, you can't get anything done. Democracy demands debate. But if you can't have a decent debate, what do you have? You might as well go out and, like we were talking about earlier, where you're dueling in the streets, where Hamilton, where people are shooting each other, killing each other, and that's what we have right now. We have the extent of that when we have gerrymandering, and when we have some of the other political tactics that are being taken that are not around protecting or promoting a good idea or even having a vigorous debate. It's about winning. And nobody wins if everybody loses if you divide up into teams and say, okay, this is a blood sport.
Yeah, and what for those that don't know, what Michael was referring to is that Hamilton, and I think it was Burr. You have to correct me on
Burr.
That.
It was Burr. Yep.
It's they became such political enemies that they ended up dueling over some issues, and that took Hamilton's life. He was killed over it. So hopefully we don't get there again. But let's dive a little bit deeper into that, and let's talk for a minute about the two political parties and where we're at as a nation. It's possible we can even expand this a little bit into talking about third parties. That is something I know a whole lot about. I set up and founded what would become the fifth largest political party, third party in the country several years ago. So, um, and we did that because of what we're going to be talking about right now tonight, and that is the divide in the two major political parties. So let's start, and I'm going to share a slide, Michael, and it's the Democratic divide. There seems to be right now two different Democratic parties under the same tent, and that would be the Main Street Democrats and the
Right.
progressive wing. Um, how would you describe those two factions inside the Democratic Party?
Well, mainstream Democrats, or what traditionally we call liberals, uh, were for more social, to have the federal government more involved in the daily lives of people, more social programs, lifting up America, by through social programs, not depending on a market-driven strategy for making that happen, and honestly getting deeply involved in the lives of people. Where the progressive wing of that party has now taken that to extremes. They call themselves socialists, democratic socialists. Well, I don't think those two words go together, but they've made them go together because they believe that the state should control everything, or should pay for everything, and everything should be free. I mean, I know this sounds extreme, but that's kind of where they're living. They're living in la la land, believing that somehow we can all, it goes back to what Stalin tried in Russia, and it didn't work. That you eliminate competition from a free market, you have unions control everything. Well, guess what? What drives the American economy is our ability to dream, and our ability to want, and our ability to be upwardly mobile. And without that sense of drive, you don't have an economy which has a tax base which can pay for all the stuff you want for free. So it's that kind of thing. But Brian, even as you divide that, so that's two-party division. But then in the Republican Party, you have traditional conservatives, small market, market-driven, small government conservatives, which was traditionally the kind of Republican Party. I considered myself one of those. And then you had the MAGA, because and it's hard to define the MAGA group, because they really are, at first it was not, small involvement, or little or no nationalism, and no involvement in outside affairs, but that has changed. And so it seems that the MAGA group is just following the charisma of our president, and whatever he believes should be, able to make America great again. And it's all about America being great again. Well, guess what? America was always a set of ideas. We're only 250 years old, ideals. And guess what? The greatness of America is not in the reality of what we have right now. The greatness of America is in our potential, and our potential to pass on these ideals, and for each generation to continue to improve on it. But if one generation decides to camp out and make things their own, and possess everything, and break every law that they can imagine, and totally rupture the Constitution and push it to the brink of disaster, it's very difficult for the next generation. Brian, the most dangerous thing that is going on right now is the distrust that our present political realities puts in the hearts and minds of everyday Americans, especially the young. Because if this young generation, if they become apathetic, if they don't focus in on the ideals, if they don't look at history, and if they resist the mega narrative of America and what made America great, then truly we are lost, because we don't have another generation of Americans that are fighting for America.
Yeah, and what's interesting too is that as a lot of the polling has shown, the younger generation, that would be the 18 through 30-ish, okay, maybe 31-ish, polling is showing that those are really gravitating in a poll towards the progressive wing of the Democrats. So if you've got somebody that's 20 years old, then they've been living with, basically zero interest rates. They're on the back end of 9/11. They've been in multiple wars. Their view of what reality is in the world is not working for them. Okay, and where this country is going is not working for them. The problem is that they don't vote. If they started voting in a block, they would change so much of the country. Now I'm going to flip over and I'm going to pick on the Republicans for a minute, because the Republican Party is, as you have rightly said, is really split into what we would call the typical conservative, Reagan conservative Republican Party and the MAGA Party. The MAGA Party is not conservative, at least in any way that I define it. Republican does not mean you're conservative. Conservatism
Right.
is a different set of ideals. And MAGA seems to be, to your point, is focused on Donald Trump and whatever Donald Trump wants. We used to believe in free trade. We don't have that. We believe that they're part of the tariff system. Peace through strength. We used to believe in the judicial system. There's so many things that we used to do and believe in that are just part of a populist, nationalist movement in the United States of America, and it has taken over the majority of that party. So my question back to you would be, where do you see, first of all, the Democrats going? Because we'll look at Maine for a second. So in Maine, we had two Democrats in the primary. It was Mills, who was what you would call that traditional Democrat, liberal, okay? And then you have Plattner, and then Plattner is well over into the socialist movement. He's got AOC and he's got Bernie Sanders sitting there campaigning with him. So, and he ended up winning that. I wouldn't say he won that primary. I would say that Mills dropped out of it, but it's because she was polling terribly. She wasn't making any money.
Right.
And so my question to you is, where is the Democratic Party going? Is that just a faction of them, or is this something that's part of a bigger movement?
The problem is they don't have a long range vision for America. They have a long range vision for power and for taking over. And I believe the most dangerous thing that could happen if that wing begins to win elections is that spirit of revenge could come out, and they could start saying, well, we saw Donald Trump doing this, so we're going to do it even more. And that, Brian, honestly, is the most destructive thing that could ever happen, is tit for tat. And we get into that kind of extremism, I mean, we are toast, because there's no adult supervisors in the room. There's no middle ground. And our country has always advanced through the middle ground. We've always been better when we can do it together. Now, we don't agree on everything, and there's always going to be the thing, but vigorous debate and kind of figuring it out together has always been our way forward. If we take this spirit of revenge, and there's a huge backlash after the midterms, and they decide, okay, the first thing we're going to do is start trying to remove the president. We're going to start an impeachment hearings and so forth. For 2 years, it's going to be, nothing's going to get done.
Yeah.
Everything's going to be swung to that end of things. And honestly, the American people just don't want it. We're fed up with it. And it just becomes a bitter rivalry. And that's exactly what George Washington said. That's exactly what he was talking about despotism. And he said that spirit that could destroy liberty in and of itself, and it does. The biggest threat that Americans have against us, it's not communism. It's no longer communism. Remember when
Yeah.
we were,
Yeah.
when I was
Yeah.
growing up,
Still
it
remember
was
the
always,
80s. Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
communism. Oh, somebody's going to drop the bomb on us and so forth. It's not communism. It's us. It's infighting with us. It's
Yeah.
infighting inside our own country because we don't have the enough Americans that believe in the American ideals. We do have enough. Unfortunately, those voices aren't very popular. They're not clickbait. They don't get enough
Hmm.
clicks. They don't get enough hearing. That's why we're doing the restoring the American dream. That's what this show is all about. It's about restoring the American dream, restoring hope in the American ideals, coming back to the Constitution and saying, hey, is this in the best interest of this country? You know, one of the things George Washington always said, he said, look, it's not, and I had a quote in the piece that I was writing that said, hey, it's not that we don't want vigorous debate. We just want that debate to end up. America does not need less conviction. It needs more character.
Right.
We just need more character. We want people to be passionate about what they believe in. Yes, be passionate about what they believe in, but come to the table and say, I'm passionate about my position. You're passionate about your position, but let's figure out a way for us to get there together. We don't
Hmm.
have to go back to the Civil War and go through that all again. We did that once, been there, done that. I'm sorry, I don't want to go through that again. But it seems that we're heading in that direction. And for what? For what? We don't even know. So some of the times, because we're the envy, we have the strongest economy in the world.
Right.
It's a consumer driven economy. Okay, we've managed that so far. And there's a lot of good that we can do with this. We have some partners now. We have some trade partners and some things we can do and create a global economy, which benefits all people, so that there is no so that we are lifting countries that are poor countries out of poverty. And we are doing some of the, see, I believe in those things. I'm a
Yeah.
conservative, but I believe that we have the capability of leading the charge in doing those things, whether it's through medicine or through better feeding programs, making sure that no kid goes to bed hungry, and those kinds of things. I believe in those things vigorously. But if all we can do is label people and degrade people and trash them in social media because they wear a label, that's
Hmm.
why, Brian, every time I write something, I put on there, and Michael is a registered Republican. And the reason I keep that label is because I want people to see me. And I did that while I was living in New York. And I want people to see me and say, oh, why are you a Republican? Great question.
Yeah.
I'm glad you asked,
Yeah.
and let me tell you why. It's not that I tout Republicanism because that's a non-descriptor at this point. People think it. I'm not a mega Republican. I'm
No.
definitely
No.
not
No.
that.
Yeah.
But it's so important that we have leadership right now. And to be honest, those voices of real leadership are few and far between on
Yeah.
Capitol Hill.
They are. I'm going to dive back to something we've talked about a little bit before, but we mentioned the Democratic Party, and if you think of it as, up here in the middle is the normal Republican, conservative Reagan Republican here, over here is the normal Democrat, liberal, the Chuck Schumers and so forth. And then as we go further down and away from each other, then you start getting into, for the Democrats at least, you start getting into the progressive side of it. It's as you said, democratic socialism. It is the government having a much bigger say in who we are and what we can do and controlling our finances. And then when you go further over on the right side, on the Republican side, then you have MAGA. That is, it's Christian nationalism. It's another form of populism, which it really is. It's populism straight up. And when you think about this, um, both of these sides, the progressive side and the MAGA side, um, they have a lot in common with each other. And they call this the horseshoe theory, right? Most of us, 80% of us are up here, but in the horseshoe theory, these two ends become closer to each other. I'll give you a good example. Joe Kent was recently, he was worked for Gabbard, okay, in
Yeah.
the government. He was number two, and he resigned. I guess what was it, maybe 3 weeks ago or something like that, effectively over the Israeli war, because he didn't think that we had any business getting involved in that war. Now, don't get me wrong, okay? I will say this: I doubt that's his only reason, but that was the one that he was most publicly pushing. Then on the other side, let's go on the progressive side. Well, the Democrats, the progressive Democrats, don't want any weapons or anything going to Israel either, because their definition of them doing that is is simply because they're destroying the Palestinians. There's a faction of anti-Semitism in the Democratic Party on that side. I'll argue that it's also on the right, and I got fussed by TJ about that about an hour ago. But I will argue that there's also a good bit of that on the right. Nick Fuentes, okay, that's a good example. But here's what I was getting to: the progressive wing doesn't believe that we should be giving weapons and supporting to Israel. The far right MAGA wing doesn't believe we should be getting involved in Israel and so forth. They believe in the same outcome. They just have different reasons to support it. And so,
It you know, it wouldn't be so bad if they didn't hate each other and will do anything at all to destroy each other. You remember back 9/11, we heard President Bush make a declaration about weapons of mass destruction. We were united, even though most of us didn't necessarily
rally around the
believe it.
flag, right? Yep.
We rallied around the flag, right? We rallied around the flag. We rallied, you attacked America, you attacked us. We're gonna get even. We're gonna find weapons of mass destruction, even if there are none. We're gonna search this out, right?
Right.
And we found a way forward as a nation together, one nation, indivisible, right? We don't have that anymore. And I'm afraid that if some catastrophic event should happen, I mean, we're at war now with Iran and so forth. But if something catastrophic happens in with our relationship with one of the superpowers, and we are caught in a conflict,
China.
we could fall apart because we can't agree. And Brian, the worst part about it is the average American doesn't trust what's coming out of Washington. We don't
Yeah.
trust what's being said day to day. We don't trust in I was, to be honest with you, what broke my heart was when I heard people, talking about election fraud. It's like, what is there election fraud? Of course. But is it at the
Yeah.
level where it's going to change the
Not a bit.
outcome of elections? No.
No.
We have a system that works. And if we don't believe in the fair and the peaceful transfer of power, we're toast.
We are.
But the problem is, where are we going to go?
Yeah.
Where are we going to go at this point?
So where does this go, Michael? Because I think that is exactly the point we're at. Our dear friend Bill O'Reilly, who we need to get on this program, he's a political Republican comms professional. He was literally William F. Buckley's nephew, okay? And if you're in the state of New York and you're a Republican, I guarantee you know his name. And he wasn't happy about it, but he said he made a statement, and he's made it several times publicly and certainly in our programs, that the two sides are more interested in scoring political points, taking hard particle stands, than they are in finding some compromise to work together, because compromise is a word that you just don't use anymore in Washington, D.C. And for them to get it, and especially folks that are involved in primaries, Republican or Democrat. I'm not picking on the Republicans. I'm
Right.
picking on both of them. Okay, Republican or Democrat, you don't get rewarded, especially if you're in a D plus 20 or R plus 20. The election is decided in the primary voters. It's not decided in the general election, and they don't get rewarded for working together. They get rewarded for hardcore partisan stances. Doesn't that break our
And
system a little bit?
it destroys our system. That's not who we are. That was George Washington's warning. You know, I hearken back to some of the good old days, which, you know, if you know, a football player, so you think of great quarterbacks, you think of great receivers, right?
Right.
And you think of great presidents, but also who was the Speaker of the House? Reagan had Tip O'Neill.
Yeah.
Democrat, strong, but I mean they worked so well together. During some of the Clinton years, he had Newt Gingrich. Newt and President Clinton, they battled, but they figured out ways forward on certain things. There was compromise at the top level because for the good of the party. You know, we just don't have those ideals anymore where we can say, for the good of the nation, I'm going to compromise or change or alter my position just a bit because the nation is more important than my being right. The nation is more important. And that's what Washington was warning, that the love of party has to, you know, has exceeded the love of country.
Yeah.
And to be honest, that's a dangerous position. When you love your party and your party's position more than
Over
you
the
love
country.
this nation and the idea of freedom for all, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's just it's an untenable position.
The facts present themselves, and I know we're getting really close on time. I just want to throw this out to the audience. If you want to find some truth and proof in what Michael's been saying, let me just give you a little statistics here. How about Tom Tillis and Cassidy from Louisiana? Both of them,
Hmm.
neither one of them are going to be reelected this next year. Tillis decided not to run. Probably a good thing because I don't think he would have won, and I don't even know if he'd have made it out of his primary. And then Cassidy got primaried out because Donald Trump got involved in that one, and it was his revenge on Cassidy, I think, for voting for impeachment after January 6th. Well, here's my point I'm getting to real quick, Michael. You ought to hear how much these folks have changed now that there's no way they're going to get reelected. They are taking stances that you and I would be proud of. They're taking stances we're going to work together. They're speaking truth to power. And, you know, it comes back to what you were saying. When you let party politics dictate who you are, what you're going to say, what you're going to do, that's how it breaks. And then there's no better sign of seeing how badly it breaks than to watch somebody where it doesn't control them anymore and how much they immediately change overnight. What do you know? So,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
so
That's right.
let's talk. So we're gonna join up again here in 2 more days, and we're gonna deep dive again. Where are we gonna go in our next meeting? And let's tell the audience what we're gonna talk about next.
Okay, well, I want to, you know, we need to talk about solutions. So let's talk about some possible solutions as we move forward, because it would be nice if we could galvanize a small group of people that are not just writing about this, but that are actually doing something about this. I loved the idea of the No Kings rallies. I
Yeah,
love the idea of millions of Americans taking to the streets. What I didn't love is some of those groups that were co-opting those meetings and, you know, and saying, oh, well, you know, because everybody, you know, it's no fool to jump out in front of a parade and say you're leading it, right? You start waving the baton and say you're
yeah,
leading it. But those people who started that were really all fed up with some of the constitutional violations. So I want to talk about some possible solutions, and we'll have some examples of some good things that could come out of this. And because restoring the American dream, right? It's not just about talking about the problems, but it's talking about what it's going to take to restore the American dream.
Love it. Love it. I actually participated in some of those marches too. So yeah, I love it. Everybody, please subscribe if you're watching this right now. Please subscribe to Restoring the American Dream. You'll get this. You'll also get to watch the political arena. You'll get to watch the Hinge of History. We have a lot of really neat stuff that's coming up through our programming. Everyone is a little bit different and a little bit of a take. As a matter of fact, the Hinge of History is about AI, and it doesn't have anything political about it whatsoever. Thank you for joining us tonight. Leave a comment, press like. If you've got a question, drop it. We'll read it on air. We would love for you to get involved with it. So again, Michael, thank you. We will see you here in 2 more days, and we're going to start talking about some real ways that we can change this country and make it better. So thanks again, everybody.
Thanks.
You've been watching Reverend Michael's Restoring the American Dream. The Noble Media Group is on all major social media platforms. Make sure to give us a follow so you can watch this show and many others.
A Noble Media Group member.